Welcome. We are recording. So we'll be here for about 45 minutes to an hour. I'm going to quickly say welcome. Thank you so much for coming in today. And my name is Marissa Axel, and I will give you more in depth about who I am and what I do in a moment, but I will quickly turn it over to Dara Richmond here, my partner in crime. And if you don't mind, though, a couple of housekeeping things. Open up the chat. That's where we're going to be asking and talking questions for the most part tonight. If you do have a burning question, we'll have a Q&A for 15 minutes at the end. And that's it. I'm going to turn it over to Dara.
Cool. All right. I'm just kind of responding to some of the stuff in the chat. Okay. I'm going to get started. I'm going to jump into my PowerPoint. But for those of you who don't know me, my name is Dara. Owner at Dara Sports PT. I'm a physical therapist. So that's my background is physical therapy, sports medicine. I work mostly with cyclists now. I do a lot of strength and conditioning plans in person and online for primarily cyclists of all ages and ranges, men, women, kids, grandpa, grandma, everybody. And I also work with runners as well, primarily. But my background is in cycling, triathlon, road, cyclocross, all that stuff. So that's a little bit about me. My part, I'm going to try to make it pretty brief. And if you guys have more questions, email me, go to my website. I always will answer questions via email and help you out as much as I can and just try to help you along if it's a physical therapy question or a strength training question or mobility, flexibility question. So please use me as a resource. I love this stuff. So I'm going to talk a little bit about some more specific things that we want to think about as we are the aging athlete and some little tips. And it's kind of a general overview, but just to give you a little bit of an outline and rubric of some things that I do with my clients and athletes, and just thinking about how to add some of this stuff into your own training plan, whether you have injuries or not, whether it's coming from physical therapy, or not. And let me get started with my PowerPoint since we are doing it. Okay, let's start it up. I'm going to press play. Hold on. I think I need to share screen.
I haven't seen it come on the screen yet. Yeah.
I just realized I need to share screen.
Okay.
I got ahead of myself, you guys. I got too excited about my own PowerPoint. Can you see that? Yeah? Okay, you're muted, but I can see you saying yes. Okay.
Yes.
Yay, this is me. Okay, so again, this is me. I'm going to zoom through this stuff and you guys will get for those of you, everyone is going to get an email from me with a recap of this and it has videos at the end. So don't worry if you miss it or I'm just zooming through this too fast. You can look it all over and email me later. Okay, so that's me with the little shaka hand sign. So this is my background. I've done a lot of different things, primarily a lot of strength-based work. So I do a lot of strength and conditioning with athletes now, but my background is in physical therapy. So I deal with a lot of injury rehab stuff. And sometimes it's in between dealing with people who had injuries and are just trying to get back to basic training and just want to get stronger. So that's me in a nutshell. And I'm going to move through this okay. So the things that we're going to talk about today is how do you dose your training? And specifically when we think about adding in a little bit of intensity work into our programming, that's one thing that I always like to make sure people are doing safely. So obviously I'm a physical therapist first. So I'm always thinking about safety, people not getting injured, but also being realistic that as we get older, there's certain things that need to change. And we do want to add in enough strength training, right? And we'll go into the why of all that. Although I have a feeling most of you already know that you probably should be adding in some strength training. So we'll talk about the dosing, meaning how often to do some of this stuff. Then we'll talk about how you would program it in. Again, this is generalized. Then we'll get into the mobility work and some ideas. Mobility means like flexibility, stretching, things like that. And then I have videos at the end, but I'm going to just email those off since I want to kind of just get through this and get to Marissa's section. Okay, so strength training. I think you probably all already know this, but it is super important to incorporate some form of strength training into your program, especially if you're a cyclist. I also wrote at the bottom swimmers. Like we do need some adequate bone loading, and that's primarily because as we get older, there's going to be more bone density loss. osteoporosis. This definitely is going to affect women more than men based on certain hormonal changes. But then for the general population after age 30, I'm not even talking about 40, which is me, 50 plus, you're going to have muscle loss every year with age. That's just going to happen. So it may not seem like a lot, but those numbers start to add up. So that's after age 30, we have muscle loss, 3 to 5%. So again, bones need loading to load to get strong and create that adequate bone density, just so that we are healthy later on in life. Again, fall risks that can lead us down a path of not a fun place to be. And then because I do see a lot of cyclists, I do see some triathletes and runners as well, but cycling is not adequate for bone loading. So even though it gives you incredible cardiovascular fitness and general fitness and health, and it's fun and everyone loves to do it, it's not enough. So it is good to kind of start thinking about even some basic stuff that you can do. And again, it doesn't need to be my program or a specific, program that I'm going to give you today, but planning something like that into your routine would be wise over the age of 30. Okay. So when we talk about dosing, and I use this term a lot in physical therapy because I think of it like you would be taking a medication or an antibiotic. Like it is all about the dosing. And so a lot of times what I find when I see patients in physical therapy, or even when I'm building out programs for people for strength training, is a lot of times they have some good pieces of the puzzle, but it's really the dosing is not appropriate. So they might be doing this, boot camp thing 5 times a week, and they're getting injured all the time. And so maybe that's not appropriate dosing wise for this person. Or maybe they're doing a really good, hip strengthener squat exercise, but they're only doing it 1 time a week. And maybe they should be doing it 3 times a week. Or maybe they're jumping into things too quickly, or they haven't built the foundation. So when I talk about dosing, that's really what I'm talking about is to be really planning it out and not just kind of, oh, I did this class and I did this class and I do a little bit of this. I always look at things as I want it to be very organized, because I want to have a specific goal that, especially if somebody has an injury, I want it to be resolved. But B, if you have a specific goal, like I want to do a century ride or whatever, you need to have a plan, right? So number one would be, how we add some of this stuff in is always build your foundation first. And so I'm not sure if you can see it because of the little screens on the side, but I can't really move them, I don't think. But anyway, number one is build your foundation. And so when I talk foundation, I'm talking about strength training. I always want to see that someone can do a squat, a push, meaning like maybe a push-up and a press, and a hinge with good form. So those would be 4 basic things. And we can go into that more later about what those actually look like, but those would be some foundation movement patterns that I want to make sure you can do that with body weight only first, with phenomenal form, before I give you anything that's jumping, plyometric, burpees, weighted, right? So when I look at somebody in physical therapy, that's one of the things I would assess, or even if I'm doing an online program, I want to see how your squat looks. I want to make sure you feel confident with it. It doesn't hurt. I want to see how you press. I want to see how you push. I want to see how you hinge, meaning like your hip hinge for your deadlift. So that's first. And I'm pretty strict about that because I'm a physical therapist and I just don't want people to get injured. And I just see it too often. So I always make sure people know that they can always go back to the basics. There is so much value in perfecting those basic movement patterns. And it's literally 4 things first. And then progress smart. So that's the second one, is that when I work with athletes who are, let's say, over 30, over 40, over 50, I want to make sure that, again, they have those movement patterns. And if they've had other injuries in the past, that they're doing them correctly, good form. There's no achiness, pain with that before we add any intensity to it. So intensity meaning jumping, height, jumping up or down onto things, or increasing like the speed of them, like shuffles or burpees or things like that. And the only reason I say that is because, again, going back to my first point, all it takes is doing that one wrong move to get injured and your whole season is ruined. It's not worth it. So I would always err on the side of going back to the basics. If you're not sure, ask somebody, get your form checked, triple check it, talk to somebody, work on that. Then the last 2 is, again, core work. So that kind of goes back to this sort of generalized idea of core strength. And when I say core, It's really kind of a garbage can term that can be confusing to people, but it's your abdominals, it's your glutes, it's your pelvic floor, it's your diaphragm. We're trying to create this vessel all the way around, like cylindrical, to support your trunk. And really, without that, that's really your base. So if that is not strong and supported from the top, from the bottom, from the sides, from the front, and from the back, then your arms and legs are moving off of an unstable base. And so that's also where people can get injured. So I'm a big proponent of working on core strength, but to me that involves strengthening a lot of things. And for women, that could be more pelvic floor work. It could be more glute based strengthening, could be more diaphragmatic breathing work, or all of it. And it's not complicated stuff. It's just really honing in on really making sure that you're a well-rounded athlete. And when I say well-rounded, I literally mean the top, the bottom, and the sides, as you think about your entire core stability. And then the last little, this is probably my longest slide. The last little takeaway is that the way that I do things is going to be different than my friend or my teammate or whoever else. So you may not be progressing through your HIIT program the same way somebody else is, or somebody else, you're like, well, they did, like, I'm faster than them on the bike, but they can do like 1,000,000 squats and I can't do 5. And like, we're all built so differently. So you always want to think about like the way your body is and your body type, plus your background and prior injuries, plus your sport is unique to every other person on the planet. You are so individual. So whether you're doing a generalized training program or not, you always want to think about like how your body's feeling with it. And if you need to go slower or faster, that's okay. So that's great. Take your time. Okay. So then we get into mobility. So that's the strength training, right? We need strength training, be smart about it, progress slowly, build your foundation, learn those 4 basic movement patterns. That's kind of my strength training in a nutshell. And then we get into dosing for mobility work. And I'll give you kind of a general answer that I give most people, is that it's similar to strength training. I want to see about 2 to 3 times a week of some type of flexibility work, stretching, yoga, foam roll, this and that. That tends to work for most athletes, active people of a certain age range. I'm going to say over 20. And again, that's kind of general, 2 to 3 times a week. Now, as we get older, most people realize, well, I might need a little bit more than that. Or I have this old knee injury, or my Achilles, or my lower back if I don't stretch enough. So that's kind of the norm. Like, these things do accumulate with age, and we get a little bit stiffer and a little bit less pliable and mobile as we get older. So if you want to continue to maintain that high level of performance, which many people can into their 40s, 50s, 60s, 70s. I mean, I just rode with like a 75-year-old guy who is phenomenal. It often will require putting in more time off the bike to do some of this stuff. And I think people get turned off by the idea because they're like, oh, well, I just want to ride my bike. And I'm the same way a lot of times myself, but I like to remind people that it's not a lot of work. You just have to be consistent with it. So finding your little routine that works for you. And at the end, I'll have some videos you can check out later of just some ideas that are like full body stretch, mobility work, yoga, flow stuff. As long as you're pretty consistent with something on a weekly program, you're probably going to be okay. It's really when people don't have the consistency, they've had some prior injuries and are not really like in tune with like what they're doing, and they're just chugging away at the cardio stuff, is where they get into problems, and then they need to come see me for physical therapy. So my 2 cents of, if you don't want to come see me in physical therapy, is to have some type of regular program and have it pretty structured. Like, even if it's a 5 or 10 minute routine, you do that, whether it's before or after. We'll get into that.
All right, can I ask a quick question?
Yeah.
As we're going along, I realized that, so is running considered cardio? Because like when I was a runner, I was getting injured all the time.
Totally.
Like all the time.
Yeah. I should have added running in there. Yeah. Running is going to give you more of that loading, but it's definitely not going to give you the strength gains that you want. Yeah.
That makes more sense now.
Yeah.
Why
yeah.
I couldn't
I
keep
should have
running.
added, I don't know why I didn't add running. Well, running is probably going to be better for in terms of bone density, bone health. But yeah, sorry. Yes. Running, cycling, swimming, cardio, great for your fitness, great for so many other things, but not great for improving your muscle mass specifically. So if we're thinking over the age of 30, we're losing 3 to 5% muscle mass each year. Running is definitely not. It's also incredibly like metabolically high. So you are losing. Even if that's the goal, you're losing muscle mass as well. So yeah. 2 to 3 times a week. That's kind of the general outline. But again, as we get older, that may be more. And I'll get into like how we can add in more of that mobility work. And when I say mobility, sometimes that's interchangeable with flexibility or stretching. So I don't get too hung up on that. I just like to use the word mobility because it's more all-inclusive of things. And the other reason is, again, if you don't want to see me in physical therapy, not that I'm trying to like not sell my services, but at the end of the day, when you do some of those mobility programs, whether it's like a little 5 or 10 minute stretch routine, it's often a really good time that you can check in, and it'll be the first chance for you to see that something's not right. Like, oh, my hip is like really sore. I didn't even notice it when I was running, or, oh, I noticed it while I was running and then I forget. Like, I always forget that things are hurting once you're done with the workout. But you do your foam roll, you're this, you're that, and then you're like, oh yeah, my knee is like super sore still, and it was hurting before. Or when I foam roll, oh yeah, like my left hip is so much tighter. That's the great info you want. So those are the reasons why I love people to do that, because the consistency of it, you will be able to see when things are starting to go off the course, right? And you'll be like, oh, I need to do more of this, and like bring it back in. Okay. So again, why we want to do some of the mobility work and the recovery stuff. It's the days when you're not doing the hard workouts where your body's recovering. I mean, this is not, I'm sure Marissa's going to say some similar things to this, but it's really those days where you're doing like the rest and recovery, or your stretching days where your body's actually rebuilding. So we need those days. We really can't do day after day after day. I would say at any age, we can't do that. But especially as we get older, we want to just kind of be cued in a little bit more to those moments where you're like, you know what, I need a day off. Like, this just isn't right. I feel tight. I'm more achy. My joints are talking to me more. There's absolutely nothing wrong with that. It's a good opportunity to listen to your body. And again, as we have those hormonal changes with age, whether it's perimenopause, menopause, whatever, oftentimes I do get a lot of patients who just are more achy. There's more joint ache, muscle ache. Your hormones are doing all sorts of weird things, and your body's responding in sometimes some unpleasant ways. So your opportunity to kind of mitigate some of that is really a lot of this stuff, you know, people find incredibly relaxing. It's a chance for you to like stretch out on the foam roll, maybe just do some yoga. Like, that's a great opportunity to kind of help your nervous system relax. And for a lot of us, it's just getting hyped up so much that if our hormones are getting a little bit out of whack, these days, they're valuable. So people undervalue some of these like rest days or recovery days or active recovery days, but I think they're incredibly valuable. And to me, they're just like, those are like excellent days to kind of work on the downtime stuff, which is equally as important. Okay, next slide. What's not letting me? Oops. Okay. So when do we want to stretch? I get this question all the time, and I don't have one answer because it depends, which everybody hates to hear, but there's different reasons why you would do more mobility work before and more mobility or stretching after. So if you're working on an injury and I'm seeing you in physical therapy, I might want you to do more of a warm up before you ride or run. Say you're like, well, you know, my calf has been starting to tighten up, or my knee, whatever. I might actually give somebody more of a plan and a program before they do their workout to help with either muscle activation, meaning like they're mimicking a movement with some strengthening work to help their brain get those muscles activated. Or I may just want them to just warm up because I need the tendons and ligaments to be more elastic and more blood flow to that area. So that would be the pre, right? Especially if you're dealing with an injury, or if you know it just takes you longer to warm up. And that happens as we age. Oftentimes you're not as peppy the 30 minutes in. So give yourself more time, right? Post workout, there's also reasons why I would give that to somebody, and you can do both. There's no one or the other. Post workout, I would definitely say if you know you're getting more sore, you're having more achy joints, you just feel like after you do a hard workout, it takes you so much longer to recover, I would highly suggest foam rolling, and getting in like some basic mobility work after your workout, like directly after the workout, because that often can help people. It can shuttle out a lot of that like lactate and just junky stuff in the body, but it's also just going to, again, kind of calm your body down and just get back into more of like a relaxed state. So pre, post, both important, depends on your program. Sometimes I'll just tell people, try one, try the other, just write it down, journal, and then see what you can do some of your own sleuthing and be like, oh, I did it before, I actually felt better. Oh, okay, maybe I'll do that. So that would be my reasons for doing one or the other or both. Again, mobility, figure out a routine. I always suggest have a go-to so that you're not just like, oh, what should I do today? It's always better if you have something written down, whether your coach gives it to you, Marissa, or I give it to you, whatever. Have it there so that you don't even have to think about it, because when you're done running or riding, like you're not thinking about that stuff. So just have it there. It's your same. It could be the most boring thing ever. I often do the same thing over and over and over because it works. I don't have to think about it, and it feels good. So make a plan. And then I'm basically finished with the slides. I'm just going to talk about the next slides are just giving you some ideas. And if you want a copy of this, I'll send it to everybody. This is just, again, some examples of a warm-up flow routine. So that might have a little bit more yoga to it. Some seated routines. Maybe you're sitting at your desk and you need a little stretch sequence. Again, these are when I say flow, usually has a little bit of a yoga aspect to it. And then some cool down sequences. Again, nothing wrong with static stretching. I think that's gotten a little bit overplayed as like, don't do static stretches. You can 100% do static stretches. There's rarely a time where I would tell somebody not to. Again, if you prefer a certain style of stretching or foam rolling, as long as you do it, at the end of the day, I'm most concerned that the consistency is there, not the minutia of the actual stretch. It's really do it frequently. And then some foam rolling ideas and suggestions and little videos. Like these are like 5 minutes. Again, when I talk about mobility programs, it's not an hour-long class. It's like 7 minutes. And that's enough for almost everybody. Physical therapy might be slightly different, but again, it's still not that much more. So again, recap, and then I'm done. Build your foundation. I cannot stress that enough. I don't want people getting injured. I have a program that is 100% about base building. So if you want to do any of my online programs, that's the program. It's literally progression, week 1, 2, 3, 4, push, pull, squat, hinge. It's skewed towards cycling, but it is based on the general athlete, because I just don't want people getting injured. So I was like, just do this, and then I can see your form. So that's my thing. But don't be afraid to go back to the basics, right? If you have some fun workout thing and you want to scale up to some HIIT intensity thing, that's totally cool. Just make sure you're okay with doing the basic stuff first. Like, don't let your ego, I'm guilty of this myself. Like, don't let your ego get in the way of just scaling things down, right? I always want people to be safe. That's what I care about most, is people not getting injured, because all it takes is one injury to ruin a season and really wreck your time. So don't let that happen to you. And then hire a coach if you need more structure. Me, Marissa, there's plenty of phenomenal people out there, or just ask us questions and we can kind of guide you on all that stuff. That's it. I have a million YouTube videos. You can always check out my YouTube stuff. I'm going to close the sharing and head over to Marissa. Where's Marissa? Where is she?
Here. Can you all hear me?
Yeah.
Cool.
I'm going to mute myself.
Okay. Yeah, that's great. Thanks, Dara. That was awesome. So I hope, okay, we had some technical difficulties. I hope nobody noticed much, but I'm back. So I disappeared for a while, but I'm back. Welcome, y'all. Hey, one thing I wanted to say is questions, totally just keep them in the chat so we can go through those at the end. There's basically what happened was somebody asked a question unmuted and it like crashed my computer. I don't understand why. Technology is not my forte, but keep it in the chat, please. That would help me out. So thank you all so much. Dara, that was awesome. So mobility is huge. And I just want to say, as a patient of Dara's in the past and probably future, yes, not just that mobility, but I have to say Dara is probably the reason I'm not injured anymore. Not just anymore, but still, because I keep up with that mobility routine 2, 3, 4 times a week on my own. So big fan. So when you say hinge, is that just bending from the hips, Dara? Yeah. Oh yeah. Okay, cool. Yeah. So hip hinging. Yes, exactly. And it is it's one of your 5 basic motions that humans do. And hip hinging is so important that's basically all we do in cycling is we hip hinge. We hinge from the hips. I love it. So absolutely. And I will say that, and I can go through this at the end, but I don't even start with hip hinges. I actually start with glute bridges because most people can't perform a perfect hip hinge unless they've gone with a professional right away. So I like to keep you on the ground and supported, which is makes me feel better about not injuring people. All right. So I'm going to launch right in. Y'all, I want to give you real fast the worksheet for the quick blurb I'm going to talk about. So you can click on that right now if you didn't download it earlier. And I'm going to pull up my thing. So one moment. Boop. Sharing the screen and oh, well, that's Dara right now, but if you could, here we go, type in the chat that you can see this, that would be awesome. I have my chat up on my phone so I can see it. There we go. So I got a yes from Dara. Okay, you can see it. So training boldly, the new rules of endurance training for women over 40. And I just said this earlier, but if there's a harder way to say peri and postmenopausal women. And first of all, not everybody's comfortable saying the word menopause yet, although we're trying to destigmatize and talk about it, normalize it, right? But for right now, I get especially women in their 40s, which is my age group, 40 to 50. They're like, menopause, that's not me. But I'm like, girl, you're starting perimenopause whether you want to or not. So we got new rules and I'm here to talk about them with you. So I want you to go ahead and, well, follow along really quick, and then I'll have you pull out your worksheet. But the problem, y'all, what is the problem? The problem is this. This is what I see when I talk about menopausal women exercising. You should do aerobics, like easy walking, jogging, swimming, and dance are great. Aerobic exercise works that large muscles in your body, which is true. And this benefits your cardiovascular system, which is also true. And it can positively help keep your weight under control. But this is where I really get angry. Work up to getting 20 or more minutes a session, 3 or 4 days a week. Y'all, if you did 20 minutes a session, 4 days a week, that's 80 minutes. Is that going to really be sustaining? No, it's just not. I think that this is total crap. So I know this is what's going around. This is what doctors will recommend that you get. But I honestly think that they think that we're like crystal, pieces of beautiful art that should be put on a shelf. Like, no, use your body. Keep the muscle on your body so you can have an active and functioning body all the way through your 90s, right? They say, make sure you can pass the talk test. Don't work too hard, which for some people, we shouldn't work too hard, right? If you have a specific injury or specific health indication, listen to your doctor, right? But I really think that by and large, most people should be exercising more. And this is where we come into really kind of conflicting information. And this is the kind of stuff that makes me scream. So I literally found this like last week on WebMD. This is what you should do, women. How do you feel about being told that, right? First of all, it makes my blood boil. So the real problem is that all this advice is based on data from outdated studies that have been done on primarily sedentary populations of postmenopausal women. So I'm just here to say, stop it with the old-fashioned bad advice. So other problems you're probably noticing, right? You're losing significant lean muscle mass, especially the 4 years right around menopause. You're riding slower and maybe gaining weight, and you don't know why. You're feeling exhausted all the flippin' time. And your menopause symptoms might be affecting your quality of life. Like, these are legitimate problems. So what's actually happening? And actually, I want to pull up, this is where I want you to pull out your worksheet. And I'm actually going to pull up because I thought I could see my notes, but now I can't. So I'm going to pull it up if you hold with me for one moment. But I want to talk an overview of why you should care, like what's actually happening. Thanks for holding just a moment. So train, here we go. All right. So what's actually happening, you guys know, it's primarily hormonal changes. So I love that. I read this last week. You're really going through another puberty, but it's kind of the reverse. So the point being, you're never going to be the person you were before you went through peri and postmenopause, because your body's literally a different body. So our hormones have changed. Your estrogen levels are at first wildly fluctuating, which is causing a whole set of challenges for you. And then right after that, it flatlines, which is causing a whole separate set of challenges. Not only estrogen, but progesterone also. And so all of this, the actual hallmarks of this change is noticeable in a rather sudden gain of usually visceral body fat right around the middle, like a little, we call it a fat tire around the middle. Sometimes it's accompanied with muscle mass loss, right? And again, increased in fat deposits around our midsection. So, however, there are behaviors, there's actions we can do to prolong or slow down all of these changes. You can create an anabolic stimulus. So anabolic, what does that mean? Anabolic means to build muscle, right? And catabolic means to break down muscle. So I want to talk about anabolic stimulus. Once you don't have estrogen anymore, you can create an anabolic stimulus by lifting weights. Now, we talked with Dara, we want to lift with safe functions, but we still need to lift weighted objects. And I'm tired of people saying, oh, you should lift 2-pound weights 20 times. No, my friend, that is how hypertrophy works, which means adding more muscle fibers and becoming bigger muscles, right? But once we don't have estrogen any longer, we can no longer achieve hypertrophy. We're not actually building more muscle cells. So we need to use heavier weights to start to keep more muscle on our body by keeping what we've got. So keeping that anabolic stimulus, we're trying to rebuild the muscle cells that we've got. And what was I going to say? Creating the right conditions for muscle protein synthesis, which is, in addition to that, eating enough protein around your workouts. So we want to create and keep lean muscle mass. But if you just work out or if you just eat protein, you're not going to keep your lean muscle mass. Okay, they go together. And because we've lost estrogen and progesterone, we lost the anabolic hormone that helps automatically building muscles. It's central to building muscle mass in premenopausal women. So we have to create that stimulus through a couple of different types of workouts. We've talked about weightlifting, resistance training. We also want to work on some high intensity intervals. And I loosely define that as an interval where you're going to take it breathless. And when you do that on the bike in a low impact way, that can be really helpful for your cardiovascular fitness. It will help you gain lean muscles, and it will help activate or mobilize any visceral fat on our belly. And then lastly, if it's appropriate, if your body can handle it, and if you want to, consider hiring a professional to help you start, is trying some basic plyometrics to maintain bone density, okay? So these are a mixture of 3 types of exercises. And this is stuff that doctors up until 5 years ago were like, no, don't do that at all. You should just walk 20 minutes a day, 4 times a week, right? So lifting heavy and helps increase your bone density and keeps your neuromuscular stimulation happening. It keeps your muscle contractions strong. And that's what you lose the most when we lose estrogen and progesterone, which is why I talk about it so much, is because that is what you lose the most. All right. When you do high intensity interval training, it allows your body this magical thing. You bypass using the, insulin. You bypass using insulin to use glycogen for energy, which is a great thing because there's this whole other process happening now that we are past peri and postmenopausal that creates tremendous insulin resistance within most of us. So when you're going towards breathless, your body cannot quickly use energy. So it switches systems completely, and it pulls glucose right from, yes, I know, Dara, it is still there. Okay. It pulls glucose right from your muscles and right from your bloodstream and into your muscles. So this is a big overview of what's actually happening. And in your worksheet, I'm kind of going deep in it because the worksheet kind of goes through that. But I just want to say, it's important to know that you can change what you do and your behaviors to counteract the muscle loss and any adipose tissue that lands around your midsection. So the last thing I think is the most important that you could take away is that cycling in particular is stuck in, well, what we always used to do in the past is how we're going to do it. And I'm here to say that the newest data coming, even this year is really pointing more and more and more that women over 40 need to practice getting stronger and keeping strong muscles. And we're already primed for being better at burning fat, using fatty oxidation when we're on longer rides. We don't have to practice it. Whereas men are actually primed to keep muscle, but they need to practice burning fat because they're just not made for it, right? So those are two serious differences between the sexes when it comes to training. So I want you to just get used to this idea of, I really need to work at keeping my muscles and I need to worry less about going long. All right, so we want to practice these training modes, and that's where we're going to get to. So that's what's actually happening. The solution I just talked about, we've got new rules, right? Stand up strong, get in some weight training, and don't fall into that. Oh, I'm going to use 2-pound weights, lift them 20 times. That's not going to be enough. Okay. Do it safely. And Dara and I were both talking. If you're not sure, hire a professional. It's not as expensive as people perceive it to be. In terms of like going to the YMCA and working with a wellness professional or hiring a physical therapist or a personal trainer, but get you on the right path so that you know what you're doing is correct. Secondly, you want to pedal powerfully on the bike. So get out of that mindset of I have to do 3 or 4 2 to 5 hour rides every week if I want to do this 200-mile ultra event. You don't. Actually, you need to practice working on keeping your muscle around. So that's where we work on high intensity interval training. It's where we work on strength on the bike. And then we talk about endurance riding. We don't ignore it altogether, okay? So, awesome. Quick blurb, this is me. I'm CEO of Action Fitness and Coaching, and I'm a cycling coach and personal trainer. Been doing that since 2008, but officially relaunched in 2019. Right before the pandemic. Still a category 1 cyclist, still a track national champion. And we had our first season after the pandemic this year. And last night I won the points race again here locally. So I still got it. It's pretty exciting. Yeah, that was last night, which is why I'm so tired today. You saw this already, but thank you so much, Dara, for bringing this on board. And she is, in addition to all of this, just an all-around amazing, I want to say science thinking forward for women's cycling. So whether you need personal training advice or strength and conditioning advice, or especially injury advice, please don't hesitate to hire Dara. She's amazing. So I just want to give you a couple of 3 steps to standing strong, where I talk about you got to lift weights like you mean it. And the hidden benefit to all of this, the hidden cool thing about all of this is the sense of empowerment and like awesome feeling we have when you're done doing the weightlifting session. So high intensity interval training is one session. Another session might be resistance training, trying to lift heavier. And the third, when it's appropriate, you could perhaps add some basic plyometrics. So what is high intensity intervals? Out of the dictionary, it's a form of interval training, cardiovascular exercise, cycling, with a strategy alternating short periods of very intense anaerobic exercise, that means breathless, with variable and less intense recovery periods, okay? And Len Kravitz is actually a really fun guy if you ever get to see any of his talks, he's really a great orator. But I give you a link down here. So you can go read this if you like. But there's always a ton of discussion about, is HIIT good? Is HIIT bad? One thing you'll hear about high intensity intervals for women over 40, for peri and postmenopausal women, is HIIT is terrible because it raises your cortisol, because it stresses you out. And I'm here to say, yes, it does that. But I want to tell you that it is a short period of exercise. And then immediately afterwards, we focus on refueling with that protein, which stops that catabolic and cortisol effect, okay? So I want you to just, when you hear people say that or you see it in the magazines, I want you to know that, well, yes, it is stressful, but you know exactly how to counter that stress, and that's by eating some protein. So a popular example of high intensity interval training, again, remember, I want you to think breathless. popular example made popular recently by a man named Mr. Tabata, not recently, but it's like the 50s, is this exactly right here. 8 times, 20 seconds, very hard of whatever it is you want to do. Could be a push-up, could be, could be a push-up, could be squats, it could be cycling up a hill, right? So it doesn't so much matter the mode as it is the style. So you're doing 20 seconds as hard as you can, 10 seconds of rest, 8 times through. If you add that up, you're like, that's 4 minutes. Okay, seems easy. But by the third set, I promise you, you're already going breathless. Okay, the very traditional and the one that has the most science backing here, y'all, is the 4 minutes hard as you can go with 3 minutes of rest. This dates back to even before
I know it's in the chat, but we can't hear you, Marissa.
Yeah, she says it froze. She's trying to unfreeze it. Okay. Hold, please. She said, hang on.
Hello again.
Oh, there you are.
It kicked me out and I do apologize, but I'm going right back. So were there any questions before I go right back in? Can you let me know, Dara? I didn't see any in the chat. Are we good?
We're good.
Question. Okay, y'all, thanks so much for that. I heard my voice stop, so that's why I stopped as well. So we're going right back in. And high intensity intervals is where I left off. And we're going into that common thing where people are like, no long, slow distance, or I should do less riding. Are you crazy? I get that a lot. But I want you to know, I'm going to go through a real quick, like science, results of a study. But long, slow distance, or LSD, can contribute to your increasing body fat. Okay, so as postmenopausal women, as premenopausal women, we're still predisposed to using fatty oxidation for energy, more so than men. So we don't really need to practice long, slow distance. We don't need to practice fat burning. We will use less fat as we age, and we still store it at the same rate. That's a depressing thing. I'm sorry. We do have elevated baseline cortisol, which keeps our inflammation high, right? Which releases more insulin and thus stores more body fat. It's this kind of a negative, awful feedback cycle. And the hard thing, y'all, I just can't say this enough, is that going long does increase your cortisol, and it makes you even more tired, which then starts this whole cycle over again. So I want to fast forward to, well, then what is actually happening? So when you are doing high intensity interval training, I want to take you through this quick study. It's a very small study sample, so I don't love that. And I hope that there's more follow-ups that kind of talk more about this. But I want to say, like, this is real science happening last year. Study, or it was not just happening, but it was published last year. So 20 minutes of high intensity interval training, or it was compared against people doing 40-minute moderate interval training. And then it compared high intensity and resistance training sessions. And they compared what happened. Okay, now this is the whole thing. You can go through and read it online. But the result I want to point out to you is that the body weight and total fat mass decreased in all groups over time. So even if you just exercise 40 minutes at moderate effort, you're still going to decrease your total fat mass. But significant abdominal and visceral fat mass losses were observed only in the high intensity interval training and the high intensity interval with resistance training groups. Okay. So what they did, their mode was 8 seconds as hard as they could, 12 seconds easy for 20 minutes. Yes, that's a ton of intervals, but it was 20 minutes of effort, and they lost a significant, I guess when expressed in percentage, total fat mass, fat-free mass, which is anything except for fat, and muscle mass were significantly modified only by high intensity interval training plus resistance training. So again, further reason we should be doing this. All right. Lastly, why does high intensity interval mobilize fat? It does a bunch of things. It increases adrenaline, which activates protein receptors in your fat. So it's like knocking on the door. Hey, fat cells, could you let go of some of those triglycerides so I could use them as energy? And they're like, sure. All right. It doesn't happen right away. It happens a little bit later, but it starts the process. Secondly, it increases mitochondria in your energy centers, right? Those are your energy centers inside your cells. This is where you quote unquote burn the fat. Sorry, I want to go right back. And then this one is just a fun fact, but PGC1 alpha is a transcriptor, a co-transcriptor, and it turns on DNA inside your mitochondria to tell mitochondria to get bigger and make more mitochondria. So you get bigger, better fat burners. So high intensity interval training burns fat. It's counterintuitive. You think going longer is better, but I'm telling you, high intensity intervals where we want to go. Breathless. Why would you lift heavy stuff? Lift heavy stuff. This is my friend Laura. That's me. We're on our recent vacation. We need to lift heavy stuff because I told you, we lose our anabolic hormone, estrogen. Anabolic means build muscle. And we need to lift heavy to provide that anabolic stimulus, to tell your body, hey, repair this muscle, make it stronger. All right. So I want you to think about this. Please stop doing the 10 or 12 or 20 rep ranges. I want everybody to start there to get your form correct. And then I want you to work either with a professional or on your own safely, but work towards something that is heavy in that 3 to 6 repetition range. All right. So things that can be heavy, you can get it to 6 repetitions and you have to set it down because this will help you maintain that strength inside of your muscle contractions, right? We talked about strength, and strength. So here's an action. You can write this down. You also will get this in your, it's in your packet, your worksheet, workbook. But pick 2 lower and 1 to 2 upper body moves per session. And we talked about doing 2 to 3 sessions per week.
Oh, we lost you again.
Or am I there? Okay. I hear myself. Okay, cool. So you can, it doesn't need to be long and involved. Literally pick 2 lower body, 2 upper body moves per session. Do it 3 days a week. And as I echo Dara, she had said, you know what? Don't make it fancy. Just make it something you can do. So pick 4 moves and get them done. Okay. I think push-ups at body weight for most of us are going to be heavy, right? So you don't need to necessarily add a weight to that. But everything else, you can absolutely get done at home. And then lastly, plyometrics when it's possible. You could start on a trampoline, as easy as that. Another possibility that is fairly lower impact is walking down a set of stairs, right? So you're still receiving that kind of that push against the ground. Plyometrics increase your mitochondria. Again, bigger, better fat burners, right? It increases your bone density. It keeps away osteoporosis. All right. And here are some examples of things that you could do. So what I would say is I'm going to kind of wrap this up here. I do have cycling specific info in your packet that you can talk about or ask questions on. Absolutely. But I want to ask everybody, how will your cycling be different when you commit to this new rule of standing strong? So go ahead and hit me in the chat. I'm going to pull that up here and stop sharing. How will your cycling be different? All right. And cycling different. Can rest? Okay, so good question. Not different, but while you guys are typing that in, I can answer this, Leslie. Can rest during interval training mean still cycling up the hill, but back in the saddle, still climbing? So rest just means it's easier than what you were doing. So let's just say, for example, you're doing 20 seconds as hard as you can go uphill. The rest, you might just turn around and go downhill, or you might just very easy pedal for that 10 seconds going uphill. I might ride less and shorter rides. Absolutely. I love that. Cynthia, yes, getting stronger on the hills. When you apply strength to the, let's say applying your strength to the protocol. And remember, I had a couple of questions about like, well, how do I do this each week? 2 to 3 in a week. Okay. One thing I didn't speak about enough, because we just kind of ran out of time, is rest and recovery. And that's where that mobility comes in. But I want you to think about more rest. We have a tendency, especially as kind of type A cyclists, like we want to be better and faster. We think more is better. But unfortunately, that is a little, and Doris even talked about that, but that is actually less true the older we get. More is not better. So I want you to take ownership of that. And alongside your 3 like weightlifting and high intensity interval days in the week, I want you to commit to 2 rest days in a week. Yeah. And that doesn't mean sit on the couch. That means doing your mobility or some yoga or some gentle walking. Sue says increasing stamina. Sue's got, yeah, Sue, it does increase stamina. You know from personal experience. Brooke, shorter rides, but more often. Right. But remember, more is not always better. How many weightlifting or strength sessions per week? Yeah. So Susan, I just said, try for 3. Try for 3. And I'm including HIIT on the bike as part of that, right? So for an average week, I might do 3 small 20-minute weight sessions. And on one of those days, I'll follow up with a high intensity interval on my bike. Again, short. Everything's done in less than an hour.
I could also say, yeah. Oh, sorry.
Go ahead.
I was just going to say for most of my besides the basic foundation program that I do, my cycling online programs are 3 times a week of strength workouts. And they're about 30 minutes. And I tell people to aim for 75% completion each week. And the mobility work is also 3 times a week. But if people need more, like especially if they're having more symptoms of achiness and soreness, I might have them do more mobility work. But I would still want them to aim for 3 times a week of strength training. But it could also be a body weight day, a high intensity day, and then just a core strength day. So the 3 times a week is nice to aim for. And I always tell people, I want them to aim for 75% completion. Well, I want them to aim for 100% completion, but at least 75%. Oh, Marissa got booted off.
I'm back.
Okay, you're back.
Hey, that was great. That I 100% agree with everything that Dara just said. So absolutely helpful. Yes, absolutely. So, but I think going away from that, just saying, commit to your recovery days. Put them in your calendar and don't be tempted to ride extra, because you're just doing yourself a disservice. You're adding cortisol. You're making yourself more tired. And remember, cortisol contributes to body fat on the body. Okay. I had one other question that came in ahead of time, so I was going to address it here. And that was, how do I go from my 30-mile ride to now doing, so they were doing 2 30-mile rides a week, to now adding up to 2 50-mile rides in a week. And so I'm going against what I just said, right? So I will always say, if you want to get stronger or go farther, you will dedicate yourself to strength training 3 days a week, right? And then high intensity interval, minimum 1 time a week on the bicycle. And that's all right. And then you've got 2 recovery days in a week. And on that, you want to focus on mobility, keeping the range of motion around your joints, and stress relief. So thinking about things that bring you the calmness. So some people love like a yoga swim, where they're just kind of relaxing swimming, an easy walk out in nature. Okay, not a hike that's strenuous, but an easy walk out in nature. An easy ride is absolutely fine as well. So recovery 2 days a week and strength training. And then you'll find that as you add the distance on that ride, you will be able to absolutely hit that 50-mile mark within probably 4 weeks. So my rule for most people doing it on their own is increase it by your long ride on that week by about 10%, and use time, not distance. So, right, because a hilly route could matter differently than a flat route. It'll be a different time. A windy day would be a longer day than a not windy day. So use time as your measurement, and just try not to increase more than 10% at a time. And that's to avoid injury, right? Okay, so within that, so if you're doing a 30-mile ride, let's say that takes you 2 hours, then I would add 120 minutes. So I would add about 12 minutes. I might round it up to 15 for the next week. And then I would add maybe 20 minutes the week after that. When you get to a rest week, which we didn't really get to talk about, I would back it off, go back to that 30 miles. But then the following time, you would go right back to where you were, maybe up to 3 hours and then another 3.5 hours, and then recover. So absolutely, you would just steadily increase 10% a week. Good. Yeah. Susan, it really depends. I have most clients riding anywhere from 3 days to 5 days a week.
Yeah, I have this, Marissa froze again, but I was going to say the same thing. Most of the people that I work with are at minimum are riding 3 days a week. Some people are riding 5 or 6 days a week. And then you just need to be smart about when is your recovery. And then if you're doing strength training, that's intensity work, you want to make sure that you're giving yourself enough time in between your bike rides so that you're not fatigued. Or if you're doing a hard bike ride as well, that it's not, you're not like going back to back and like burning yourself out.
Exactly. So I was going to say, last part is that it's a lot of like, what do I do? How do I put it all together? So I know Dara has programs that you can work with her, so you can learn the foundation. You can get that coaching. She can put together a program for you. I have programs. You can absolutely work with me and take all the guesswork out of it. You're just like, set me up a program and I'll do it. Absolutely. So I have all right, I am back, but I'm going to wrap this up soon. Dara, what else do you have to say?
We had, what is Brooke's question? Strength training. It depends on you. It depends on how much you're riding. It depends on what your background is in strength training. I would typically do, did you mean time of day? Brooke? Yeah. Oh, yeah. I don't think there's an ideal. I am definitely keen on making sure people are adequately nourished if they're going to do a bike and a strength training on the same day. So if you haven't eaten anything, I probably would not want you to do any strength training. So that matters most. But morning, evening, doesn't matter to me. Some people can do a double day of a strength and a bike, but I typically would want the strength training to be on a very light bike day. It's rare that I get someone who can do a full intensity day. It's possible, but it requires a ton of eating and being really spot on with your recovery. So that's my.
All right.
But you guys can email us with more questions. I know quite a few of you, but for those who don't, shoot me an email anytime, any place. I'm always available, as is Marissa, because she's amazing. So.
Thank you all for coming and putting up with our tech issues. These gremlins today. But this was fantastic. I will be Dara's sending an email tomorrow as a wrap up, and I will have as well the worksheet and the slide and you can watch this again to catch anything that you missed. Okay, yeah, you're welcome. Thank you. All right, y'all. Have a great evening, and we'll catch you soon.
Thanks, everybody. Thanks for showing up. Yay. Thank you, Marissa.
Thank you, Dara.
All right. See ya.
Bye, y'all.
Bye.